Hey, you there. Before we dive into this wild story, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from today? And if you love stories where the underdog comes out on top, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more like this. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who judged you before they even knew you? Stick around because this story about a woman who faced just that, and trust me, it gets juicy. It was a bright, sunny morning in Willow Creek, a cozy little neighborhood where every house looked neat and tidy. The lawns were green, the fences were white, and the mailboxes all matched. But there was one person who stood out in this quiet place, a woman named Sarah Miller. Sarah was new in town, and she spent most of her days in her backyard, digging in the dirt and planting flowers. To everyone else, she seemed like just a regular lady who liked gardening. Nobody thought much about her. Nobody, that is, except Karen Thompson. Karen was the boss of the neighborhood's HOA. That's a group that makes rules about how houses and yards should look. Karen loved rules. She carried a big clipboard everywhere, scribbling notes about messy grass or crooked signs. Her face always had a frown, like she was looking for something to complain about. And when she saw Sarah's garden, oh boy, did she find something. Sarah's garden wasn't like the other yards in Willow Creek. It was wild and colorful, full of flowers that didn't grow anywhere else. There were tall sunflowers that seemed to nod at you, pink roses that smelled like candy, and tiny purple blooms that sparkled in the sun. Vines curled around her fence, twisting like they had a mind of their own. At night, some neighbors swore those vines glowed, but nobody believed them. To Sarah, this garden was her happy place. She'd spend hours there, her hands covered in dirt, smiling like she knew a secret. But Karen, she didn't like Sarah's garden one bit. "It's too messy," she'd say, stomping over to Sarah's house. "Those flowers don't follow the rules. Trim those weeds, Sarah. This isn't a jungle." Karen's voice was loud and her eyes were sharp, like she wanted to scare Sarah into listening. But Sarah never got mad. She'd just look up from her plants, give a small smile, and say, "Okay, Karen, I'll see what I can do." Her voice was soft, but there was something in her eyes, a little spark that nobody noticed. It was like she was hiding something big. The neighbors watched all this from their windows. They'd see Karen yelling and Sarah nodding, and they'd whisper to each other. "Poor Sarah," they'd say. "She's so quiet, she won't stand up to Karen." Some of them thought Sarah was shy, others thought she was weak, but none of them knew the truth. Sarah wasn't just a lady who liked flowers. She was someone special, someone with a secret that could shake up the whole neighborhood. See, Sarah's garden wasn't just a bunch of pretty plants. It was more than that, way more. Every flower, every vine had a story. Sarah had spent years learning about plants, studying them in places far away from Willow Creek. She knew things about flowers that nobody else did, things that could make people gasp, things that could make Karen wish she'd never picked a fight. But Sarah didn't tell anyone. She kept her secret close, letting Karen think she was just a nobody. Every morning, Sarah would wake up early, before the sun was even up. She'd slip into her backyard, her bare feet touching the cool grass. She'd talk to her plants, whispering to them like they were old friends. "Good job growing so tall," she'd say to a sunflower. "You're looking strong today," she'd tell a vine. It was strange, sure, but it made her happy. And if you looked closely, you might notice something odd. When Sarah whispered, the plants seemed to listen. A flower might turn toward her, or a leaf might wiggle, even if there was no wind. Karen, though, didn't care about any of that. All she saw was a yard that didn't fit her perfect neighborhood. She'd march over almost every day, her clipboard tucked under her arm. "Sarah," she'd shout loud enough for everyone to hear, "your garden's a mess, it's breaking every rule we have." She'd point at the flowers like they'd done something wrong. "Get rid of those ugly things or I'll make you sorry." The other neighbors started to notice Karen's visits. They'd peek out their curtains watching her yell. Some of them agreed with Karen. "That garden is kind of wild," they'd say. "It doesn't look like our yards." Others felt bad for Sarah. "She seems nice," they'd mutter. "Why's Karen so mean to her?" But nobody spoke up. Karen was in charge, and crossing her was like asking for trouble. Sarah, though, didn't seem bothered. She'd listen to Karen's complaints, nod politely, and go back to her plants. Sometimes she'd pick a flower and hold it close like it was telling her something. The neighbors thought that was weird, but they didn't ask questions. They just figured Sarah was a little odd, maybe lonely. They had no idea what she was really up to. One day, Karen went too far. She didn't just yell, she left a note on Sarah's door. It was written in big, angry letters: "Fix your garden by next week or I'll tear it down myself." When Sarah found the note, she read it slowly. Her fingers brushed the paper and her smile faded just a tiny bit. For the first time, she looked like she might be angry, but she didn't say anything. She folded the note, tucked it in her pocket, and went back to her garden. That night, the neighbors noticed something strange. Sarah was out in her yard later than usual, long after the sun went down. She was kneeling by her vines, her hands moving fast, like she was fixing something important. A few people thought they saw a faint glow, like fireflies dancing around her plants. "That's silly," they told themselves, shaking their heads, but deep down they wondered, what was Sarah doing, and why didn't she seem scared of Karen? The truth was, Sarah wasn't scared at all. She dealt with people like Karen before, people who judged her, who thought they knew everything, but they didn't know her. They didn't know what she could do. Sarah's garden wasn't just a hobby, it was her life's work, filled with plants that were rare and powerful. Some could heal cuts, some could make you sleepy, and some, well, some could do things nobody would believe. Karen thought she was in control, but she was wrong. Every time she yelled at Sarah, every time she waved that clipboard, she was stepping closer to a big surprise. Sarah wasn't the kind of person who fought with words or fists. She fought with her plants, with her smarts, with her secrets, and those secrets were about to bloom. As the days went on, Sarah kept working in her garden, quiet as ever. She planted new flowers, trimmed old ones, and whispered to her vines. The neighbors kept watching, curious but too shy to ask questions. Karen kept complaining, her voice getting sharper every time. And through it all, Sarah stayed calm, her eyes holding that little spark, like she knew something nobody else did. What was that spark? What made Sarah so sure of herself? Nobody in Willow Creek had a clue, not Karen, not the neighbors, not even the kids who rode their bikes past her house. But they'd find out soon enough. Sarah's secret was like a seed buried deep, waiting for the right moment to grow, and when it did, it would change everything. So what do you think so far? Can you imagine living next to someone like Sarah with a garden full of surprises? Or maybe you know someone like Karen, always bossing people around. This story's just getting started, and trust me, it's going to get wilder. Keep watching, because Sarah's secret is bigger than anyone expects, and Karen's about to learn that some flowers bite back. Karen Thompson was not a happy person. Every week, her complaints about Sarah Miller's garden got louder and meaner. She'd march right up to Sarah's wooden fence, her shiny black shoes stomping the grass flat. In her hand, she held her big rulebook, waving it around like it was a sword ready to slice through anything she didn't like. "Your garden's an eyesore," she yelled one sunny afternoon. Her voice was so sharp it made the birds in the trees fly away, their wings flapping in a panic. "It's ugly, Sarah. Fix it, or I'll make you regret it." The neighbors in Willow Creek heard every word. They peeked out from behind their curtains, their eyes wide. Some stood on their porches, pretending to water plants while listening. They whispered to each other, their voices low. "Poor Sarah," they said. "She's so quiet, she won't fight back." They thought Sarah was shy, maybe even scared. To them, she was just the new lady who liked flowers too much. They didn't think she could stand up to someone as bossy as Karen. But Sarah wasn't scared, and she definitely wasn't weak. She was patient, like a cat waiting for the right moment to pounce. Sarah had spent years learning about plants, special plants that most people didn't even know existed. She traveled to faraway places, studied in big libraries, and worked in secret gardens. Every time Karen shouted, Sarah stayed calm, but her smile changed a little. It got tighter, like she was holding something back. Her fingers would brush the petals of a small flower in her garden, a flower so strange it didn't look like anything the neighbors had ever seen. Its petals were bright green with tiny red spots, and it seemed to lean toward Sarah like it was listening. Karen didn't notice that flower. She didn't notice a lot of things. All she saw was a messy garden that didn't follow her rules. Every day she found something new to complain about. "Those vines are too wild," she'd snap. "Those roses are too tall." She'd point her finger at Sarah's yard, her face red with anger. The neighbors started to think Karen was right. "Maybe Sarah's garden is too different," they mumbled. They liked their yards neat and boring, with short grass and plain bushes. Sarah's garden, with its bright colors and twisty plants, made them nervous. One morning, Karen came by earlier than usual. The sun was barely up and Sarah was watering her flowers. Karen didn't even say hello. "Your yard's a disgrace," she shouted, loud enough to wake half the street. "It's making our whole neighborhood look bad. Do something about it." Sarah stood there, holding her watering can, her face calm. "I like my garden," she said softly. "It's special to me." Karen laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. "Special," she said. "It's a mess. You better clean it up or I'll make sure you do." Then she turned and stomped away, her clipboard swinging. The neighbors saw it all. A few felt bad for Sarah. "Karen's being mean," they whispered, but others nodded along with Karen. "She's right," they said. "That garden doesn't belong here." Nobody asked Sarah what she thought. They just assumed she'd give up eventually. After all, Karen always got her way. She'd been the HOA boss for years, and everyone listened to her. Well, almost everyone. Sarah wasn't like the others. She didn't argue or yell back. Instead, she went back to her garden, her hands digging in the dirt. She hummed a quiet song, and her strange flower seemed to sway along with it. If you looked closely, you might notice her eyes. They weren't scared or sad. They were sharp, like she was thinking hard. Sarah wasn't just planting flowers anymore. She was getting ready for something. Things got worse a few days later. Karen started talking to the neighbors, trying to get them on her side. She knocked on doors, her rulebook tucked under her arm. Sarah's garden is ruining Willow Creek, she told them. We need to make her fix it. Some neighbors agreed right away. It's too wild, they said. Others weren't so sure. Sarah's nice, they mumbled, but Karen didn't listen. She wanted everyone to think like her, and she wouldn't stop until Sarah's garden was gone. One evening, Karen went too far. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Sarah was in her backyard, tying up some vines. She didn't hear Karen coming until it was too late. Karen didn't knock or call out. Instead, she taped a note to Sarah's front door. It was written in big, angry letters. "Rip out that mess by Friday or I'll do it myself." The note was mean, like a bully's warning. A few neighbors saw Karen leave it, but they didn't say anything. They just watched, waiting to see what Sarah would do. When Sarah found the note, she stood on her porch for a long time. She read it slowly, her fingers holding the paper tight. The neighbors thought she'd cry or get mad, but she didn't. Her eyes narrowed, like she was seeing something far away. She folded the note and put it in her pocket. Then she walked back to her garden, her steps slow but sure. Something in her had changed. She wasn't just gardening anymore. She was planning. That night, the neighbors noticed Sarah's light stayed on late. They saw shadows moving in her backyard, like she was working on something important. A kid on a bike swore he heard a weird hum coming from her garden, but his mom told him it was just the wind. Still, people started to wonder, why wasn't Sarah upset? Why didn't she fight with Karen? They didn't know it, but Sarah wasn't the kind of person who fought with words. She had other ways that Karen would never see coming. Karen thought she was winning. She thought her note would scare Sarah into ripping out her flowers. But Karen didn't know Sarah at all. Every mean word, every loud yell was like a spark in Sarah's mind. She wasn't weak or shy. She was waiting, watching, and getting ready. Her garden wasn't just plants, it was her secret weapon. And soon, Karen would find out exactly what that meant. The days went by in Willow Creek, and Karen Thompson didn't let up. She kept picking on Sarah Miller's garden, staring at it like it had done something awful to her. Every morning, she'd walk past Sarah's house, her eyes squinting at the bright flowers and twisty vines. Her frown got deeper, like the garden was a personal insult. "It's too wild," she'd mutter, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "It doesn't belong here." The neighbors started to notice Karen's complaints more and more. They'd gather in small groups, whispering about Sarah's garden. Some of them took Karen's side. "She's right," they'd say, nodding. "That garden is weird. It's not like our yards." They liked their grass short and their bushes plain, so Sarah's colorful flowers seemed strange to them. Others, though, liked Sarah. She was quiet and kind, always waving hello with a smile. "She's nice," they'd whisper, "and her flowers are pretty." But even those people didn't dare say it out loud. Karen was the boss of the neighborhood, and nobody wanted to make her mad. She ruled Willow Creek like a queen, and everyone knew it. Sarah, though, didn't seem to care about Karen's mean words. She kept working in her garden day and night. When the sun went down and the stars came out, you could still see her out there kneeling in the dirt. She'd talk to her plants, her voice soft like a lullaby. "You're growing so strong," she'd say to a tall sunflower. "Keep shining," she'd whisper to a tiny purple flower. It was odd, sure, but Sarah didn't mind if anyone saw. She loved her garden, and her plants seemed to love her back. One night, a neighbor named Tommy was walking his dog. He passed Sarah's house and stopped dead in his tracks. He swore he saw something strange, a soft glow coming from her backyard, like fireflies dancing around her flowers. His eyes got big and he ran home to tell his mom. Sarah's garden was glowing, he said, all excited, but his mom just laughed. "Oh, Tommy, it was probably a flashlight," she said, shaking her head. The other neighbors heard about it and giggled. "Sarah's weird," they said, brushing it off. They didn't believe in glowing gardens. To them, Sarah was just a funny lady who liked plants too much. But strange things kept happening, and not just in Sarah's yard. Karen started having problems with her garden. Her roses, which she bragged about all the time, began to droop. Their red petals turned brown and fell off no matter how much she watered them. Her perfect green lawn, the one she mowed every week, got patchy. Big spots turned yellow like something was stealing the grass's life. Karen was furious. She checked her sprinklers, added plant food, and even called a gardener, but nothing worked. Her yard looked sadder every day. Of course, Karen didn't blame herself. She pointed her finger straight at Sarah. One hot afternoon, she stormed over to Sarah's fence, her face red as a tomato. "You're sabotaging me," she screamed, her voice so loud it echoed down the street. "You're ruining my roses, you're killing my lawn." The neighbors peeked out their windows, watching the show. Sarah was in her garden holding a small shovel. She looked up, calm as ever. "Maybe you're not watering them right," she said softly. Her eyes twinkled like she was hiding a laugh. Karen's mouth dropped open. She wasn't used to people talking back, even quietly. "You'll be sorry," she snapped, then turned and marched away. The neighbors buzzed with gossip after that. "Did you hear Karen yell at Sarah?" they'd say. "She thinks Sarah's messing with her yard." Some thought Karen was right. Sarah's garden was strange, so maybe she was up to something. Others shook their heads. "Sarah's too nice for that," they said, but they weren't sure. Nobody knew what to think anymore. Sarah's quiet ways made them curious, but Karen's loud voice made them nervous. Sarah didn't let the gossip bother her. She kept tending her garden, her hands busy with dirt and leaves. Sometimes she'd clip a flower and hold it close like it was whispering secrets to her. Other times she'd dig near her vines, burying tiny things nobody could see. The neighbors watched, wondering what she was doing. One kid, Jenny, rode her bike past Sarah's house every day. She told her friends, "Sarah's plants move sometimes, even when there's no wind." Her friends laughed, but Jenny wasn't so sure it was funny. She'd seen those vines twist like they were alive. Meanwhile, Karen got meaner. She started holding meetings with the neighbors, trying to make them hate Sarah's garden as much as she did. "We need rules," she'd say, waving her clipboard. "No more messy yards. Sarah has to fix hers or we'll make her." Some neighbors nodded, afraid to argue. Others stayed quiet, thinking about Sarah's kind smile. But Karen didn't care what they thought. She wanted Sarah's garden gone, and she'd do anything to make it happen. Then another strange thing happened. One morning, Karen found a weird mark on her front lawn. It looked like a circle of tiny holes, like something had poked the ground. She ran to her roses and saw the same holes around them. "It's Sarah," she yelled, shaking her fist toward Sarah's house. "She's sneaking over here at night." But when she looked at Sarah's garden, it was peaceful, with butterflies fluttering around the flowers. Sarah was there, watering her plants, acting like nothing was wrong. Karen's eyes narrowed. She didn't have proof, but she was sure Sarah was behind it. What Karen didn't know was that her mean words and loud threats were like little seeds. Every time she yelled at Sarah, those seeds sank deeper into Sarah's mind. Sarah wasn't mad, she was too smart for that, but she was watching, waiting, and planning. Her garden wasn't just flowers and vines. It was something bigger, something Karen couldn't understand. And those strange things happening to Karen's yard, they weren't accidents. They were hints, tiny clues that something was coming. The neighbors kept talking, picking sides. Some stuck with Karen, saying Sarah's garden had to go. Others started to like Sarah more, noticing how her flowers made the street prettier. But nobody knew the truth about Sarah, not yet. She stayed quiet, her hands in the dirt, her eyes full of secrets. And every night when the neighborhood went to sleep, Sarah's garden seemed to hum, like it was getting ready for something big. The Friday morning came fast in Willow Creek, and Karen Thompson was ready for a fight. She had enough of Sarah Miller's garden with its bright flowers and twisty vines. She grabbed a pair of big, shiny hedge clippers from her garage, her lips curled into a smug grin. "Time up, Sarah," she muttered to herself, stomping down the street to Sarah's house. The neighbors heard her coming. They peeked out their windows, their eyes wide with worry. Some stepped onto their porches, watching quietly. Nobody knew what would happen, but they could feel something big was about to go down. Karen pushed open Sarah's gate and marched right into the garden. The flowers seemed to stand taller, like they knew she was there. "Time up," Karen announced, her voice loud and mean. She held the clippers high, ready to chop everything down. The neighbors held their breath, their hands gripping their curtains. Sarah was standing by her front door, her arms crossed. She looked calm, like always, but her eyes were sharp. "I wouldn't touch those plants if I were you," she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the air like a knife. Karen laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "You don't scare me," she snapped. She stepped closer to a big vine curling around Sarah's fence. The vine was thick and green, with leaves that shimmered in the sunlight. Karen raised her clippers, ready to slice it in half. The neighbors leaned forward, their hearts beating fast, and then it happened. The moment Karen's clippers touched the vine, it moved, not like a breeze was blowing it. It moved like it was alive, twisting fast and wrapping around her wrist. Karen screamed, a loud, scared sound that echoed down the street. The clippers fell to the ground with a thud. The neighbors gasped, their mouths open in shock. Karen tried to pull her hand free, but the vine held tight. It didn't hurt her, but it wouldn't let go. She looked around, her face turning pale. "What's happening?" she yelled, her voice shaky. The neighbors stepped closer, their eyes glued to the garden. Something was different now. The flowers weren't just sitting there, they were moving too. Bright yellow daisies turned their heads toward Karen like they were watching her. Tiny purple blooms sparkled, giving off a soft glow. The air smelled sweet, like candy, but it made Karen's head spin. She stumbled, trying to stay on her feet. Sarah walked forward, slow and steady. Her calm smile was gone, replaced by a serious look. "You should have listened, Karen," she said, her voice firm. She clapped her hands once, loud and sharp. The garden came alive. Vines curled higher, blocking Karen's path like a green wall. Red roses opened wider, their petals glowing faintly. A strange hum filled the air, like the plants were talking to each other. The neighbors froze, too stunned to speak. Karen's eyes got big, her breath coming in quick gasps. "What?" "What is this?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah stood tall, her hands on her hips. She looked at Karen, then at the neighbors, her gaze steady. Who are you?" Karen asked, her words tripping over each other. Sarah's voice was calm but heavy, like it carried a secret too big to hide anymore. "I'm Sarah Miller," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm the lead botanist for the Global Plant Research Institute. My garden, it's not just flowers, it's years of work, experiments with plants that protect themselves, that fight back. Plants that know when someone's trying to hurt them." The neighbors gasped again, their whispers buzzing like bees. A botanist, Sarah wasn't just a quiet lady who liked gardening, she was a scientist, a genius. Karen's face went white as a sheet. She shook her head like she couldn't believe it. "No, no way," she mumbled. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes locked on Karen's. "You burned my work once before," she said, her voice low and serious. "In another town years ago. You thought my plants were weird then, too. You destroyed them. Did you really think I'd let you do it again?" The neighbors went silent, their eyes darting between Sarah and Karen. Karen had burned Sarah's garden before. They never heard about that. Some remembered Karen talking about a town she used to live in, but she'd never mentioned Sarah. Now it made sense. Karen's hate for Sarah's garden wasn't new. It was old, like a grudge she'd carried for years. The vines around Karen's wrist tightened a little, not hurting her but holding her still. She looked scared, her hands shaking. I didn't know," she said weakly. Sarah tilted her head, her face hard like stone. "You judged me," she said. "You judged my plants. You thought you could bully me, scare me, make me rip out my garden. Big mistake." She clapped her hands again and the vines moved once more, curling around Karen's ankles now. They didn't squeeze, they just held her in place like a warning. The flowers glowed brighter, their colors dancing in the sunlight. The sweet smell got stronger, making Karen sway. She looked like she might fall over, her eyes wide with fear. The neighbors couldn't look away. They thought Sarah was shy, maybe weak, but now they saw her in a whole new way. She wasn't just kind, she was strong, smart, and in charge. Her garden wasn't just pretty, it was powerful, like something from a storybook. Tommy, the kid who'd seen the glow before, tugged his mom's sleeve. "I told you her plants were special," he whispered, his eyes shining. His mom nodded, too amazed to argue. Karen tried to speak, but her words got stuck. "Let me go," she begged, her voice small. Sarah shook her head. "My plants decide that," she said. "They know what you did, they know what you wanted to do today." The vines shivered like they were listening. The neighbors stepped back, their hearts racing. They'd never seen anything like this, plants that moved, that thought, that fought back. It was scary, but it was also amazing. Sarah looked at Karen one last time. "You thought you were better than me," she said. "You thought you could ruin my work again, but my plants, they're my friends, and they don't like bullies." The vines loosened just a little, giving Karen a chance to stand straight. She didn't run, though, she was too shocked. The garden hummed louder, its glow spreading to every corner. The neighbors felt it, too, a strange, warm feeling, like the plants were watching them, too. Karen Thompson stood in Sarah Miller's garden, shaking like a leaf. Her clipboard, the one she always carried to boss people around, lay forgotten in the dirt. The neighbors watched, their eyes wide, unable to look away. Sarah raised one hand, calm and steady. The vines that held Karen's wrists and ankles shivered, then let go. They slid back into the garden, dropping Karen to her knees with a soft thud. She looked up, her face pale, her breath fast and scared. Sarah stepped closer, her voice clear but kind. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said. "But you're done bullying people, Karen. You can't push folks around anymore, and if you ever step foot in my garden again, my plants will remember you." Her words weren't loud, but they felt heavy, like a promise. The flowers around her seemed to nod, their petals glowing faintly in the sunlight. Karen didn't say a word, she just stared, her hands trembling. The neighbors stood frozen, their mouths open. They'd never seen Karen so quiet. She was always yelling, always in charge. But now she looked small, like a kid who'd gotten caught being naughty. Sarah turned to the crowd, her eyes soft but strong. "Go home," she said gently. "Everything's okay now." One by one, the neighbors nodded and walked away, whispering to each other. They couldn't stop talking about what they'd seen: vines that moved, flowers that glowed, and Sarah, who wasn't just a gardener but a hero. The next day, big news spread through Willow Creek. Karen quit being the HOA president. She didn't even show up to the meeting to explain why. Instead, she sent a short note saying she was done. By lunchtime, people saw her packing her car with boxes. Her face was red and she kept her head down, like she was too embarrassed to look at anyone. That evening, she drove away from Willow Creek for good. Nobody knew where she went, but they didn't care. They were just glad she was gone. Without Karen, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, happier. The neighbors couldn't stop talking about Sarah. "Did you see her garden?" they'd say. Those plants were alive. They started visiting Sarah's house, shy at first. They'd knock on her door or wave from the street, asking questions. "What are those flowers?" they ask. "Why do they glow?" Sarah was happy to answer. She'd smile, her hands dirty from digging, and tell them about her plants. "Some can heal cuts," she'd say, pointing to a pink bloom. "Others keep bugs away," she'd add, showing them a spiky green leaf. The neighbors listened, amazed. They learned that Sarah wasn't just kind, she was super smart. She'd spent years studying plants, finding ways to make them stronger, smarter, even magical. Kids like Tommy and Jenny loved her stories best. They'd sit by her garden, their eyes big, as she talked about vines that could grab things or flowers that could sing. "Can you teach us?" they'd beg. Sarah would laugh and hand them a tiny shovel. "Sure," she'd say. "Start by digging right here." Sarah's garden grew bigger and brighter every day. New flowers popped up, their colors so bright they made the whole street glow. Butterflies and bees came from miles away, dancing around her yard. The neighbors stopped calling it weird, they called it beautiful. Soon, strangers started coming too. Scientists in fancy coats drove to Willow Creek, their notebooks full of questions. "This garden's a miracle," they said, taking pictures of Sarah's plants. They wrote stories about her in big papers, calling her a genius. People who'd once laughed at her now wanted to know her secrets. They'd beg, "Tell us how you did it." But Sarah just smiled and shook her head. "It's all in the dirt," she'd say, her hands back in the soil. Sarah didn't change, even with all the attention. She stayed kind, quiet, and happy right where she belonged in her garden. The neighbors loved her for it. They made her the new HOA leader, but she didn't act like Karen. She made rules fair, letting everyone plant what they liked. Soon other yards had flowers too, not as wild as Sarah's, but bright and happy. Willow Creek wasn't boring anymore. It was alive, just like Sarah's garden. Okay, everyone, what did you think of that story? Pretty wild, right? Sarah's garden was full of surprises, wasn't it? Before we go, drop a comment below. Have you ever surprised someone who thought you couldn't do something big? I'd love to hear about it. And if you liked this story, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Stories like Sarah's make us think, don't they? They show us that sometimes the quiet people are the strongest, and those who judge too fast, they're the ones who miss out on the real magic. Let's talk about what we learned from Sarah and her amazing plants. Sarah Miller's story isn't just about flowers or a mean lady named Karen. It's about something bigger, something that can help us all. Sarah was quiet. She didn't yell or fight when Karen was mean to her. She didn't brag about how smart she was. She just worked hard, loved her plants, and waited for the right moment. That's what made her special. She didn't need to be loud to be strong. She showed everyone that you can be powerful in your own way, even if nobody sees it at first. Think about it. Have you ever felt like Sarah? Maybe someone thought you weren't good at something, like drawing or running or math. Maybe they laughed or said you'd never do it right. It hurts when people judge you like that, doesn't it? But Sarah's story tells us not to give up. She kept going even when Karen was mean. She believed in her garden and she believed in herself. That's a big lesson. No matter what anyone says, you can keep working on what you love. One day you might surprise them just like Sarah did. Karen made a big mistake, didn't she? She looked at Sarah and saw a quiet lady with a messy garden. She didn't stop to ask questions or learn about Sarah's plants. She just decided she was right and Sarah was wrong. That's what happens when you judge too fast. You miss the truth. Karen thought she knew everything, but she didn't know Sarah was a scientist with flowers that could move and glow. If she'd been kinder, maybe she'd have learned something cool. Instead, she got scared and ran away. That shows us something important. Being mean doesn't make you win. Being curious and kind does. Sarah's garden was like a secret treasure. It looked wild and strange to the neighbors, but it was full of magic. Some plants could heal cuts, others could keep bugs away. Some could even grab things, like those vines that stopped Karen. That's what makes life so exciting. There's always something new to discover. Maybe you have a treasure like that, too. It could be a hobby, like painting or building things. It could be a dream, like becoming a doctor or a singer. Whatever it is, don't let anyone tell you it's not important. Keep working on it like Sarah did with her flowers. You never know how big it might grow. The neighbors learned a lot from Sarah, didn't they? At first, they were scared of her garden. They listened to Karen and thought it was weird. But after they saw what Sarah could do, they changed their minds. They visited her, asked questions, and even planted their own flowers. That's another lesson. Sometimes people don't understand you right away. They might laugh or say mean things, but if you stay true to yourself, they might see you in a new way. The neighbors didn't just like Sarah's garden in the end, they loved her too. They made her their leader because she was kind and smart, not loud and bossy like Karen. What about you? What's your garden? Maybe it's not plants, but something you care about a lot. Maybe you love writing stories or playing soccer. Maybe you're really good at helping your friends feel better when they're sad. Whatever it is, hold on to it. Work on it every day, even if it's just a little bit. Sarah didn't build her garden in one day. She planted one seed at a time. That's how you make big things happen, too. Little steps add up, and soon you've got something amazing. Sarah's story also reminds us to be kind. Karen was mean because she didn't understand Sarah's garden. She could have asked, "Hey, why do you love those plants?" But she didn't. She just yelled and made rules. If we're kind to people, we might learn something cool, like how to grow a glowing flower or how to be a better friend. Being kind doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough to listen and learn. So let's think about Sarah one more time. She was quiet, but she was powerful. She was kind, but she stood up for herself. She loved her plants and they loved her back. Her story shows us that everyone has something special inside them, even if it's hidden at first. Maybe you're hiding something special, too. Maybe it's waiting to bloom like one of Sarah's flowers. Don't be afraid to let it grow. Don't let anyone stop you, not even a bully like Karen. The next time you feel small or scared, remember Sarah Miller. Remember her vines that grabbed Karen's clippers. Remember her flowers that glowed in the sun. Remember how she turned a mean moment into something beautiful. You can do that too. You can be quiet but strong. You can be kind but brave. You can build your own garden, whatever it looks like, and make it shine. Thanks for sticking with me through this story, everyone. I hope it made you smile and think. Drop a comment and tell me, what's your garden? What's something you love to do or dream about? And don't forget to hit subscribe so we can share more stories like this. Sarah showed us that the quiet ones can change everything, and I bet you've got some magic in you too. See you in the next one.